Welcome to Bellingham Voices. I'm Marie Marchand, your host, and on today's show we have 3 local leaders, young people who are working in our community in social services, specifically with the population of people experiencing homelessness. Teal Coyote is Program Services Specialist at the Whatcom Homeless Service Center, and Kate Robertson is the team lead for the Homeless Outreach Team. And that program is partially funded, actually mostly funded, by the city of Bellingham from Bellingham Home Fund money. And that's a levy that was passed in 2012 overwhelmingly by voters. In the second segment of my show, I'll be interviewing Malora Christensen, and she's the Associate Director of Francis Place. Welcome to the show, Teal and Kate.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
I'd love to start with you, Teal, to set the stage for our conversation. Can you let us know what the Whatcom Homeless Service Center does? So maybe a little bit about its history, its function, and even its goals.
Yeah, so the Homeless Service Center was established in 2008. Before that, so it's a relatively new program, but before that, we had all of our different partner agencies all doing their own, services, and that was great, but there was a team of people who kind of started to see that there were some missing pieces. Between the years of 2005 to 2007, which is a little before my time at the agency, so I had to ask Greg Winter for a little background, but he let me know that there was this 2-year strategic planning process that happened where they kind of identified some needs in our community. There was great services being provided, but they were very fragmented. There was no way for services to coordinate with one another. And that kind of left out a population of people, specifically people who identify or are chronically homeless, which means they've been out of doors for a very long time or have had multiple experiences of homelessness over the past 3 years. So that population of people was being very neglected. There wasn't a lot of money for homeless housing, specifically for that population and other populations. And really there were some emerging best practices that weren't being put to use, like housing first or diversion. So this team of people kind of had this vision of one central agency that would kind of become the hub of all of our different partner agencies and help them tie in. Also, the idea of being a central point of knowing people who are experiencing homelessness and tracking their situations and their progress towards gaining stable housing. On top of that, being a central point for our partner agencies in recognizing what their programs are trying to do and what populations their programs are trying to serve, and then matching people with those programs. So on top of that, we have we organize a lot of advocacy activities to try to, advocate for more affordable housing and develop more resources for populations, specifically our chronically homeless population that was kind of being left out from some of our partner agencies, not in any bad way, but they were just having a hard time tying into the system. So trying to make it more client friendly, and we also, lead the Homeless Coalition. So continuing that idea of strategic planning for our community and, making sure everyone's talking to each other.
Is that what's known as coordinated entry?
Yeah, so the Whatcom Homeless Service Center has helped develop our coordinated entry system, which basically means that when a household is experiencing a crisis, a housing crisis, that's really stressful. And before coordinated entry, they would have to kind of think and use their skills to see, what programs are out there, where are they, how do I get there, how do I apply. Coordinated entry basically means a one-stop, no wrong door way to serve people with one centralized intake. So instead of telling your story, maybe some traumatic events over and over to different providers, you get to one time complete one centralized intake. It's a lot of questions, but there's all trying to figure out what programs a household might be eligible for. So they can do that one time and not have to rehash out their story to a bunch of different strangers, which could be really traumatizing. So the idea of coordinated entry is to make it, fair for the client, better for the client, and then fair for our system. We acknowledge that there's not enough resources. So what we have to do is target all of the scarce resources to, the people who really need that service first. Yeah.
I'm hoping you can elaborate on one aspect of coordinated entry, and that's how you communicate with your community partners. So, for example, I'm real curious about when a nonprofit, their own agency separate from yours, and they have their own board of directors legally responsible for the people they serve, how they retain their autonomous decision making on who they serve and who they don't, because it's their staff that may want the discretion about serving, or they may not have the expertise to serve a certain segment of the population.
Yeah, that's a great question. And all of our partner agencies and their programs are geared towards serving specific populations. So they have really, certain set of, they're trying to address certain needs. So they do have their own, they are able to screen and return referrals, but I want to put a plug in for our referral specialist, Terry Bryant, because she works very hard to use our centralized intake to really make sure that our first screening process, figures out what needs the client has, what their strengths are, and that matching process, we take that very seriously before we make a referral to make sure that it's a good referral. It's for best fit for the client specifically, but also for the program for our partners to make sure that they're not going to have to return a referral, because that's, that could have negative impacts on our clients. But together as a community, there's always going to be some households that have, certain barriers, certain challenges to, there's not enough programs for everyone. So we try to, as a system of, service providers, come together to make creative solutions to help support, some of these households that, no one fits into a box. So, yeah.
Thank you for explaining that.
Yeah.
So Kate, tell us about a day in the life of Kate Robertson.
Sure. Well, there's not actually a typical day. I mean, the only thing typical is that our team starts at 7 every morning, and we go out to connect with folks who may be asleep in doorways, on the sidewalks. That 7 to 9 time is the period where we're able to go out and just get a feel for what the day is going to be like. And our day is really dictated by who we come in contact with, the needs that present themselves, and who wants to take steps towards various either connecting with other services or people who just want to engage. So we do our best to just stay open and kind of see what presents itself, and there hasn't been a day yet that hasn't filled up really quickly. So through the conversations in the morning, we connect with folks. Sometimes it's just establishing the relationship for the first time, maybe introducing ourselves. If someone's new to town, we may introduce them to the food programs, or newly on the streets anyway, kind of try to connect folks with basic needs. And then again, we just really focus on building the relationships, and out of that, as people feel comfortable sharing what their needs are, making connections to those services. I also spend a lot of time kind of behind the scenes working with different nonprofits, agencies, social service providers, so that our team really understands what services are available, what's needed in order to connect, and how to widen that pathway for an individual so that when they're ready to take steps, there's a clear path to get there. Because it's really frustrating for somebody who's I think asking for help and pursuing change is one of the most courageous things that any of us can do. And what happens a lot when we engage in systems is that we hit this wall, and often the process for getting connected with things that are needed is so confusing and requires so many steps that no matter who you are, it's so easy to get discouraged and just stop. So we really just want to widen the pathway for people to have access to the things that they're interested in and need.
And through your work, what have you found are the largest contributors to somebody becoming homeless?
So, in 2016, in our point-in-time count, which is the process we use to figure out how many individuals are experiencing homelessness, there were 719 people who completed a survey. I think that there are probably 719 reasons why people have ended up without housing. I think primarily homelessness exists because there's a lack of affordable housing and places for people to live, right? I think that there are a lot of other contributing factors that lead somebody to the place where they experienced housing insecurity initially, and a lot of things that happen once somebody's out on the street that creates more barriers to get there, to get into stable housing. So, I mean, I think one of the biggest things we see are a lack of connection to community, whether it be immediate family, neighborhoods. You know, most of us, or for a lot of us, we're lucky enough to have a community that we can lean on when things get tough. And when you don't have those social supports, it makes it really hard sometimes, you know? So I would say that that's one thing that is often in common. Definitely people are experiencing job insecurity, you know, maybe they lost housing for whatever reason and can't find it. Domestic violence is a contributing factor. Mental health, medical, you know, a lot of people end up out on the street because they had some sort of medical incident. Maybe they weren't able to, you know, if somebody goes into the hospital and they lose housing while they're in there, and then all of this debt kind of racks up. It's that can also contribute to why somebody's on the street. So there are a lot of reasons, but primarily it's because people can't find affordable housing.
When I worked at Friendship House Homeless Shelter in Mount Vernon, I found that probably the number one cause of people being homeless there and at the shelter was trauma. I saw that loss of housing was almost a secondary thing for people. Some people came there after they lost a child or a spouse. So we started having trauma groups for people. So I really appreciate you saying, I mean, there's 719 different reasons that people become homeless. Teal, so your job and your position, your scope of duties kind of is different than Kate's because she's involved in direct service with folks and you seem to be more behind the scenes, more operational. So tell us about what you do, and also, do you always feel connected to the mission even though the scope of your duties is behind the scenes?
Yeah, so I would say it feels kind of 50-50. I do a lot of, you know, behind the scenes administrative type support, processing POs and different things like that, making sure our office has what it needs to kind of run smoothly and everyone's, you know, has the tools that they need to serve the clients. But I do meet with clients regularly during our walk-in hour times. So I end up working with people, primarily people experiencing homelessness who don't really have kind of a program in mind or any sort of resource in mind and are really trying to tackle their barriers to housing. Things like maybe a negative rental history where we can write a letter of explanation, or some bad credit where we can write a letter, you know, explaining what had gone on in their life, or a criminal history record that, you know, has some sort of a way that we can say that, you know, going forward as a tenant, this isn't going to be a problem for me. Increasing people's income is a big barrier. You know, before somebody is able to get into housing, like there's a program where we can help someone with deposit costs, but to maintain, they're going to need enough income to pay all of their monthly expenses on time. So a lot of my work is with people who are experiencing homelessness, but maybe need to gain employment or maybe need to look into, you know, other ways to increase their income. So I end up working with people when they are kind of in the trenches. And then when they do get referred to programs, you know, I don't hear from them, which is good news, usually, right? So every once in a while, we have a gong that we got for a present that we ring if we are able to house anyone. But that's as far as my success kind of goes with working with people. But to address your question about feeling connected to the mission, yes, I absolutely do. The Whatcom Homeless Service Center's mission is to build relationships to end homelessness through strategic partnerships, advocacy, and systems change. And I feel like I've been doing that for 5+ years now. You know, with our team, we've had more than enough opportunities for advocacy and just building relationships with clients and partner agencies and, you know, other agencies in the community, healthcare agencies, and all sorts of stuff. So. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
For sure.
I was just going to throw something in. You know, one of the things that I think happens in our world is that the need far surpasses what there are resources for.
Yeah.
So while it may not have been written into Teal's job description to do direct service, the reality is that she is the glue that kind of holds our department together, and is often one of the first people, one of the first people that somebody interacts with. And we really, our department, we have to work together as a team, and we just fill in the gaps. And one of those big gaps is that until somebody's identified a housing program is identified, there's not case management available for most individuals. So Teal plays a huge role in connecting with folks who may be eligible for programs, maybe they're not eligible for programs, but looking at what are the steps we can take now before a housing opportunity is identified to increase the odds of somebody finding housing.
Yeah, and the outreach team, I think, has been instrumental in helping our folks who maybe don't have the capacity to come into the office. Maybe that's just, not something that sounds fun or doable for them. So for a lot of our people who kind of need that extra support and meeting people where they're at, our outreach team has been instrumental in helping certain people or pretty high needs connect with some opportunities that we would have never before been able to connect them with. And so, yeah.
Well, one thing I want to say is that I really admire your passion that you have for helping people and for being involved, and the change that you've been a part of. Yeah, so thank you on behalf of the community for doing that.
Thank you.
So Kate, I haven't interacted that much with you, but the times that I've been with you, I've noticed these counselor type qualities, that you're very compassionate and soft-spoken and you're a good listener. And I'm wondering if you always had those, or if it's something you learned in college when you got your BSW, or throughout the course of your work, or kind of everything.
Sure. I think I've always, my personality has always been bent towards this work. I love stories and I love people, and listening comes really natural to me. Definitely, I went to school in Indiana. My bachelor's degree is in social work, so I learned a lot of skills through that. But mostly it's just being out in the field with people. I've learned so much in the last 2.5 years just working in this program. And mostly I just think that I try to give what I want, which is really to be known and to hear and to be understood, and I feel like that's a pretty safe place to start from. So that's kind of what drives that, I guess.
There seems to be an idea in our community floating around that people who are experiencing homelessness are coming from outside our community in droves.
Yeah.
Whereas in reality, most people report that their last stable housing was in fact in Whatcom County. And that's been consistent through the years, and in fact in other communities. Do you encounter that misunderstanding in our community through your work?
So that's something we hear a lot, that people are being shipped up here, and that's just not the experience that we've had as we interact with people. Just this morning we were out doing outreach, and we ran into two individuals who were new to town, and we asked, what brought you to Bellingham? And it turns out one person had family who lives out in the county. So she came back to Bellingham because this is where she grew up, even though she's been away for a long time. And I would say that that's really typical. I mentioned the point in time count earlier, and those surveys, we ask individuals, where did you have your last stable housing, right? And so that's how we know that over 70% of the folks who are out there right now lived in Bellingham previously. So yeah, we just don't see people coming here for the services. And the reality is that Bellingham is a town that very few of us are actually from. And I would say people who come here who don't have connections come here for the same reasons that I moved here from Ohio, which is this is an incredible place to live. I figured that there would be opportunities for me to grow and to engage in the activities that I love. And folks experiencing homelessness are no different than people who moved here to go to college or any other thing. We're just all looking for the place where we belong, so we end up in the places that we're drawn to. But yeah, I don't see people coming here from other places just for the services at all.
Yeah.
That's a good note to end on, and I think it's been a really important conversation that I've been wanting to have on the show, and you've brought some profound insights, and I'm truly grateful for your time today.
Thank you so much for having us.
And in our next segment, we'll welcome Malora Christensen. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Bellingham Voices. On our next segment, I'd like to welcome Malora Christensen. She's a leader in the community for homeless services, and she's involved in Francis Place, which recently opened in 2015. Welcome to the show, Malora.
Thanks, Marie.
So tell us about Francis Place.
So Francis Place is an apartment building in downtown Bellingham. And it is and was specifically built for permanent supportive housing for adults that had experienced chronic homelessness, and came out of a need, very much what Kate and Teal were talking about, came out of this need that there's just not appropriate and affordable housing for people who are, maybe have a variety of barriers. And so the county, the city, community partners all came together and said, we're gonna build this building. And there was parking lot there before. Mm-hmm. And they said, we're gonna create 42 units of housing, and it's gonna be set aside for these very specific people. It was pretty controversial. It was quite the process. A lot of downtown vendors were very scared and worried about what that would mean for their businesses and for the downtown vibe. But people persevered, and over time it got through, it got built, and we opened in August of 2015. Mm-hmm. And so 42 individuals moved out of where they had currently been, which had been cars and sleeping in tents, sleeping on the street, being in an emergency shelter, being hospitalized or institutionalized, and moved into their own apartment at Francis Place.
Mm-hmm. I'd imagine that for the downtown vendors and neighbors, that when people have stable housing, it's safer for the whole community and mm-hmm. makes the community more vibrant because everybody has a chance to be healthy.
Absolutely. And, a big, concerns were, that we feel that this group of people, they're going to increase crime. They're going to increase drug use. They're going to be loitering, and there's going to be public intoxication, or there's going to be these other things that are often associated with people that are experiencing homelessness. And really, the reality is that many of those things happen because people don't have a place to be. They don't have bathroom facilities. They don't have a place to sleep at night. They don't have a way to deal with stress. In the way that people who have housing can maybe deal with that. And so, we've been open almost 2 years, and I would say that our neighbors think we're good neighbors, and we strive really hard to be that. And a big part of my job is being in touch with those people, the business down the street, the bike shop, the coffee shop, the brewery, the weed shop, whatever it is, to say, hey, do you have any concerns? And here's my cell phone number, and we can chat about it.
Oh, great.
Yeah. One of my favorite things at Christmas this year is a few residents organized other residents to bake cookies, and it was totally their idea. They made plates and with little notes that said, hey, Merry Christmas from everyone at Francis Place. Mm-hmm. We enjoy being your neighbor.
Oh, that's very sweet.
Yeah, I love it.
Where did the name Francis Place come from?
Well, so it is a Catholic Housing Services and Catholic Community Services run building. And so whenever Catholic Community Services and Catholic Community Housing Services, they do housing throughout Western Washington. And whenever a new building is built, the name is a big deal. Mm. And It was actually named after St. Francis of Assisi, and then also Pope Francis, who came, his position started in 2013. So right at that time when so many community conversations were happening about, as a community, do we really believe that this type of housing that we should be doing this and putting resources towards it? And so both Pope Francis and Francis of Assisi were a big part of that.
Talk a little bit about your educational background and then your wider role in the community, because it goes beyond Francis Place, is my understanding.
Yeah, so I have a master's in social work from the University of Washington, and really fell into homeless housing and quickly learned that this is a bit of a dream job, and it's an amazing privilege to be able to work with some of the most resilient and creative and charming and loving and kind community members that we have. And so my scope has been, I opened Francis Place and have been a big part of that. Just the daily operations, we have 24-hour staff on site there. All of our residents receive ongoing case management, and then we do a lot of programming in the building as well. So we do community gardening, we have meals, we do birthdays, we do all of the holidays. We have a creative writing group. We're trying to find people who want to maybe come in and do haircuts or painting or pottery, all sorts of things like that. And you had mentioned trauma groups. That's just a need to have healthy pro-social engagements where people can experiment with trying something new or trying to be social in a way that maybe they haven't in a long time. It's kind of I call it a long game. I mean, it really is. We're with people as long as it makes sense for them to be there and they want to be there. And so we get to watch people stabilize over a long period of time. So even now at, just coming up on 2 years, we have people who moved in 2 years ago, and we're just now starting to see these signs of stabilization and engagement that we weren't sure it was going to happen. And so we do that, and then we also, Catholic Community Services does homeless housing we use scattered sites, so we have an additional 40 clients that we work with in the community that are placed in, and this is all, working with coordinated entry and the Whatcom Homeless Service Center, to work with private landlords and property management companies to have those individuals lease an apartment in an apartment complex where their neighbors may or may not be in a housing program. And then we're also working with Skagit County, and Catholic Community Services is working across Western Washington to address the need of this type of housing for adults that have experienced chronic homelessness, because it is a very unique group of individuals.
When I worked in Seattle in 1998, I worked as a residential counselor at Kerner Scott House, and it was almost exactly like Francis Place.
Yeah.
Do you know Kerner
Yeah,
Scott House?
I know of it. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it was 1998, and it was a pilot program with HUD,
Yeah.
and so it was really successful. So maybe it contributed to this idea of
Absolutely.
permanent supportive housing and housing first model.
It is, yeah.
And I remember almost every resident that came through the doors, and I built relationships with them, and I learned that, some of them hadn't had medical care in decades because they were chronically homeless. And so there's some people, like I went in with the mentality, I was really young, hadn't gone to college yet, I went in with the mentality that, I can save these people. But in just 1 year it grew to, no, I can walk alongside them. And in the moment, the most important thing is compassion and sharing that relationship. And that was a beautiful just inner transformation for me. And I just found the people to be really endearing. And when I came to Francis Place last week to meet with you, I was really struck by the beautiful artwork. And you had said that it'd been done by residents.
Yeah.
And it's just such a reminder. Kate was talking about, well, there's not homeless people coming in droves like some people in the community think. There's people trying to find where they belong. They're just like us. And so to see paintings around it, people who are homeless, they're part of our community,
Absolutely.
People who are housed have gifts, people who are unhoused have gifts. So the artwork was really beautiful, and it reminded me of my whole experience at Kerner Scott House.
Yeah, and that's exactly, I mean, so much of what we do at Francis Place is trying to interrupt an idea or a thought that I think people over time have grown to believe, which is that they're not wanted here and that there's not a place for them in this community. I mean, how could we allow someone to be homeless for 15 years, and how could they believe that they were wanted? And so, like, everything that we do, I mean, we could say it's trauma-informed care, you can call it housing first or harm reduction, or, you know, it's evidence-based practice, and it's interrupting that and every day saying, no, you're valued and you're wanted and we want you here. And, you know, as long as you want to be here, and we're going to figure this out.
That's very beautiful.
Yeah, it is. It's beautiful work. I pinch myself every day that I get to do this work. It's really special.
Wow. Oh my goodness, that's great. Can you share with us maybe one or two stories of people that you've worked with there where maybe you've seen transformations that have filled you with joy?
Yeah, I can talk about that transformation. I think if you're really interested, you should think about having like some of our residents on your show, because I would love to let them, you know, say what that's been like. But for me, observing what that stabilization can look like, and it's different, like Kate was saying, there's a different reason. Everybody's story is so different. So their journey towards what I would say is more stability also looks completely different. And so I can give you just kind of examples of different people. I mean, we have residents who have dementia. We have residents with traumatic brain injuries, so there's some cognitive disabilities. We have people that, due to medical concerns going untreated while homeless or other sorts of trauma, struggle with incontinence. There are people who you know, are really struggling with PTSD, and so daily learning how to find other ways of coping with stress. And so a lot of just like behavior, I mean, you could call it behavior modification. It's really like life coaching and saying, okay, so this time that happened, like, what do we want to do next time? Because that was really not an appropriate or safe response. And so what I've seen is just these, you know, a young woman who, when she moved in, didn't want to be there, because we all think housing is the answer, and it is. I mean, people need that safety, but also some people they don't move in and think, oh, this is perfect now my life is okay, it's great, it's fine. It's like all those things that contributed to experiencing homelessness don't go away once you have an apartment. So the safety aspect and having, you know, facilities and a place to shower and a place to lock your belongings up and make food, you have that. So those basic human needs are met. But then, you know, it can get really kind of scary for people. And I think there's also a fear of failing. So they're getting this huge opportunity, and what if they mess it up? Are we going to kick them out the minute they mess up? So that's so much of what we do, is trying to make sure they understand what the boundaries are and letting them know that we're not going to give up on them. But, you know, watching a young woman who did not, she signed her lease and then really did not want to be there for lots of different reasons. And over time, she would come in just in the middle of the night. And so the late night person would interact with her and maybe make some food with her, or maybe, you know, talk about what was going on outside. And in the next 6 months, she, you know, started to be there more regularly, and then more during the day. And now she's a very large presence in our community and interacts with all the residents and all the staff, and, you know, is still struggling with a host of concerns, but just recently asked her case manager if the case manager had time to work on income with her. And that is just like, it's taken almost 2 years for that young woman to say, oh yeah, I've heard a lot of times that I have these disabilities and that I am eligible to have income. And so many of my struggles are due to the fact that I don't have any money. And so, you know, her asking that, it was like our hearts we just melted. It was like, that's amazing. That's such a huge victory. And yet it's hard to explain to people, because it doesn't, you know, It seems small, but it was actually huge.
It's huge.
Yeah.
Thanks for having this great conversation, and thanks for your passion. I feel really inspired after talking with you and Kate and Teal about, the way that we're moving in this community. So thank you.
Well, thanks for having me.
And thanks for joining us for Bellingham Voices. We'll see you next time, and take care.